Hello, good evening, and it's a Sunday evening here in Relove Guitars in Devon, in southern England, southwest England. And here we have tonight, a Sunday evening, we have Adrian's vintage V99 Les Paul copy. Now, first thing to say about this beastie is the V99 is quite similar to the V100, except the V99 is an older model and it's a bolt-on neck, as you can see there. So when I first got into doing this, there was quite a lot of opinion online that would scoff at these bolt-on neck Les Pauls, the vintage ones anyway, and as a result you could get them pretty cheaply on the second-hand market, because the point of view that people held was that it's a V99, it's rubbish, it's bolt-on neck, so therefore 70 quid or something, you know, and you could get them cheaply at auction, and the asking price was low as well. But they're a great big lump of vintage capital V brand name Les Paul, and this one is equipped with still got the original plastic on the scratch plate, which I'm not a fan of. I think that should come off anyway, but it's a solid chunk of guitar and I've enjoyed playing them. I think they're really great for the money. Now there's something, I played this guitar at home the other day, and hence my notes behind there, but one of the things that struck me or appeared to me fairly early on is, can you see that there's a mismatch between the angle of the neck and the slope angle of the top of the guitar? It's hard to see because it's all in dark. Maybe if we look down here we can see it better. Yeah, you can probably see it there. So the neck is rising up away from the body as the body shape as the top slopes down. Normally on Les Pauls you'll find that the neck angle pretty much matches the body slope angle, to avoid you ending up with what we've got here, which is one of the first things I noticed, which is the bridge down on its stops and still more playing height than I would particularly want. So this neck really does need, and you can see it's quite tall over the other side there, see that? So this neck does need a shim, so that's one of the first things, but that's no big deal. A 0.25mm shim should cure that. Next thing, well, we've got a loose one of those there, and we've got a missing one here which I'll replace and check the hole. We've got Wilkinson pickups, they play fine. We've got a Tunematic bridge with curious intonation at the moment. Now this pattern, when I checked it through my tuner on the amp straight out of the case, this intonation appeared to be right, which is a bit odd. So it tells me the strings are probably not very good, or they're a bit had it. Anyway, we shall check with new strings whether that pattern still pertains, which it shouldn't do. And we've got the weak spot here as well, the plastic nut. Even though it's yellow, it's still horrible. So if I read through, we've got sharp fret ends, and these are often the case on these old vintages. For some reason they didn't quite get the fret ends right. They sort of, when you get up this end, you can really feel them. It's like they didn't dare cut inwards with the end beveling to, you know, risk scuffing up the finish on the edge, and so they held back off it. And you know, I can feel the sharpness here, and that does play a part. So I will round them off as much as I can by hand as we go through the process of the setup. So I've got sharp fret ends, lowish frets. They're not particularly young or tall, so we need to be very careful. Loose neck strap, button, missing end strap, we got that. The relief is flattish on the bass side. What am I thinking of that has? No, that's another one. Yeah, flattish on the bass side, but more relief on the treble side. So we've got a kind of an uneven curve here in the relief, which is often the case very flat here and noticeably more curved. That's a sort of flaring of the neck. Nothing we can do about it, we just work with it. The B string is sitaring slightly. That's not the fret buzz part of it, it's the fact that this feels like the nut is cut wrong, so we're going to get rid of that anyway. We have got missing switch tip, which hopefully I'll get a spare one to replace. This is okay. Got the action, and it needs a shim. Yeah, so yeah, there's no more. There's a tiny bit of adjustment room, but there's none on this side, so we need to shim it. Okay, so that's quite a few little things, nothing sort of major in one go. But let's have a look. Let me get my mirror out so I can see what I'm doing here. So the first thing I'm going to want to do, let's get my book out of the way. I will consult it. It's good to, I like to take some notes while I play it offline so I can just build up a little catalogue of what I think needs doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slack off the strings and we'll get rid of this nut because we're going to replace it with a Tusq adjustable, which is going to give this guitar its tuning stability that it never had really, and that's one of the great things about the Tusq adjustable nut. That's why I'm such a fan of it. So to do that, we'll get the thingy cover off, truss rod cover, although I don't think there's necessarily any adjustment I need to do here to the truss rod. We shall see anyway. Everything will get a thorough clean on this guitar because it's been around a long time, so I think it will benefit from a spruce up. Now, what I do know about vintage brand guitars is that they are just dying to crack and send all of your headstock finish everywhere. Now, with the Epiphones I've been working on a lot recently, the Epiphone factory tends to do the finish, then machine the slot, and then put the nut in. I found, to my cost, that vintage tends to put the nut in and then spray the finish, or something like that, or they put the nut in when its finish is still soft or something, with the result that it shrinks around the nut and you get a real problem. And the problem is if you tap it off as you would want to do, it often does tap off, excuse the noise, it does tap off, but it taps off and tends to break all of the finish off here at the same time, which is an absolute pain which you don't want to happen. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just sort of push the strings off to one side, and I'm going to saw this here nut out of the slot so I can get myself a nice clean slot so we can fit with the, or put the new adjustable nut in there. Now there are string spreaders available, and I just never seem to have got round to buying one, so that's my mistake. But I sort of use kind of temporary versions, if you get what I mean. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is get working with this thing. We've got a couple of options when it comes to removing a nut like this, a couple of options to cut it off. In fact, any saw that you've got will do, as simple as that, so you don't have to be too precious about it. All you have to be able to do is to control it. Now this one, as you can see, is slippy, so I might even start by taking the Dremel to it, which I can control a bit better. And the Dremel will be quicker, and it's plastic. Now the heat of the Dremel will probably slightly melt the plastic as well, but we don't really care too much about that because the end result is that we want to get all of that material, all of the nut out of there. So this Proxon tool that Big Stevie once gave me, donated to the Reloved Guitars workshop, is a great tool. The only downside is that I lost the little locking clip up here somewhere, and I've never been able to find it, so I've always had to use an adjustable spanner, which feels naughty and wrong. Right. Okay, so here we go. Let's get some cutting done. Now this is plastic dust, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a... No, I can't really put a thing on because I can't talk to you. Now, it's plastic, but it's making dust, which is unusual. Or is it bone? That would be very unusual if it is. It's behaving like bone. That's okay. We're still going to get rid of it. Yeah. Bone. So it is bone. It's very yellowed. That's okay. So that's probably been put in by an owner, because I'm pretty certain these didn't come with bone. But we want it out because it's not keeping tune as well as it will when it has a Tusq one. So now we have the first cuts made, and obviously when you're doing this, you're trying to you try to avoid cutting into the slot or the shelf, but sometimes it's just simply not possible to avoid it altogether because of the fact that you can't see where you're at, and you're doing your best nonetheless. So what we've got here is we've got a difficult to reach, so we can sort of break some of this and chip it at the bottom, but then we're just going to, hopefully, that's cracking. I was hoping to break this in two, which eventually it does, but we don't have a lot to grip on at the back because we've got a curved thing. So I've got a little bit more to go to cut right the way through. Like I say, if you go through, it's not the end of the world as long as we get a straight slot at the end. So we've pretty much severed the thing there. Now what we want to do at that point is to sort of just chip it off. We can go this way, and we can probably get it, there you go, that part's snapped off, which is good, and it will come out mostly. Well, you can see that got a little bit trapped in there. So what I'm doing is I'm trying at all costs to make sure that I don't do anything bad to this front edge. Now, given that it's almost certainly may well be stuck to the front edge, we can try pushing this way, but if it's really stuck like it is there, you'll still get, it's still effectively glued. It isn't glued, but it's glued by finish. Excuse me, I've got to get this sharp blade from behind here, and I want to do it without cutting my fingers off. It's a scalpel that's got magnetically stuck to the wall with two magnets, which presents a slightly dangerous challenge. Right, safely out the way. Back to there. Sorry, back to there. Right. So, people in the know always say, you should make sure you cut down the front to break the seal, and I've done this quite a lot of times, and it's in my book it's fairly anyone's guess whether this separates it in any way that's more effective than trying to do it any other way, mainly because it's stuck to the finish. You can see that. So it doesn't want to break off. This side does, half of it down here does, so we can get rid of half of that if we were careful. Hooray! I've got just one bit left. I mean, the other alternative is we can go in this side a little bit with the saw, but it's kind of difficult because we don't really have the full length to work with unless we go in at a bit more of an angle. I'll see if I can cut a bit further down into this as well. Right, this next bit should come out all right. So slowly, hey, we're out. Good. So I'm not even sure this is bone, but it's a very, very brittle plastic. Made a lot of dust, which is unusual for plastic used in nuts. They tend to be spongier than that. Okay, so at this point now we can get out our nut slot cleaning thing. The word is a, what is it? It's a file. And we can keep it clean. Right, so just as an all-rounder, somebody the other day told me off for talking about real general, you know, what's the word? That thing when you, memoirs, you know, autobiographical nonsense, instead of talking through exactly what I was doing with the setup. And you know, having done it 800 times on this channel, sometimes you get a little bit bored of saying the same thing every time. But then, okay, I get it. Somebody new to the channel, like that person was, wouldn't know what was going on or why I was doing anything. So, out of respect for that, here I am doing my standard, inverted commas, setup. Now, by that, I mean, I tend to do this just about every time I do a setup. So when I set guitars up, I very often, most of the time in fact, change the nut and make sure it's got a Tusq nut, if it hasn't already, and sometimes a Tusq adjustable nut, which is a kind of way of using Tusq nuts that I've sort of developed myself, as you'll see in a minute. And I do that because I am a total slave to tuning stability, and my experience has shown me that a Tusq nut gives great tuning stability, and an adjustable Tusq nut does everything I need to do. It gives me the perfect, or it allows me to set the perfect first fret action, which is critical in the guitar playing and staying in tune. And it also allows me to fit a nut. Excuse me, I'm just trying to get something. Allows me to fit a nut with the right pre-lubricated Tusq material, which will mean that will also help it stay in tune. So I do that because I've discovered that, or certainly from my point of view, tuning stability and the right first fret action is absolutely critical. It's the biggest single improvement you can make to the way a guitar will play, whether it's electric or an acoustic, which is why I go to that length. So these are components that, or the nut insert is a component that Tusq, or Graphtec I should say, started making as a fix to a Gibson problem. So here it is, this little unit, and it's a Tusq insert that's designed basically to go into the Gibson 0 fret arrangement on there, I think 2016 or 2015 onwards. Don't kill me if I've got the wrong dates, but on those on those particular series of guitars when they brought that in. And it was a great idea, and it allowed Gibson for the first time ever to have decent tuning stability, because the nuts they were using before were crap. Anyway, they made this. Gibson recognized they had a problem, and their solution to it was to make a titanium replacement for this insert. And because the reason why it was not working was they had chosen to make it originally in brass, which is too soft when you're dealing with 0 frets. So brass was no good. Graphtec saw an opportunity and created this, what they call Tusq version, or Tusq insert, to fit that unit and cure the problem for Gibson, whilst Gibson made its own titanium solution, which they, I believe, sent out to customers, or customers could get one way or another. Anyhow, but the good thing was, when I saw these adjustable insert parts of the Tusq nuts, or the Tusq inserts, I realized that I could put these to use to solve problems that I'd been having, which were the amount of time and effort it took me to set the correct first fret action, the normal way, traditional way, with files and so on. So I gave myself time to play around with these inserts, and I got a friend to make me 3D printed bass units. I started out making them by hand with resin, and they were so effective that I carried on, and now we have a unit that can go in here and do the job. Now, with the Epiphones that I've been doing recently, these tend to have a really great drop-in fit. With the Wilkinson, the vintage like this one, they aren't going to fit anywhere near as well. So I'm going to have to check a couple of things, actually height, and I'm going to have to alter the thickness by using a sanding block. Now, again, it's time consuming, but it's absolutely worth doing for the results, performance results you get. Now, I think I've just chucked away the bits, so I can't actually measure the gap, or measure the existing nut. But I can see I've got about 1 millimeter to come off, and height-wise, I'm going to be not far, not too bad. I could, if I can find a lower one. I've got different versions of these. Let me see if I can find a lower one to get going with. I put them all somewhere clever, and then can't remember where they went. This isn't good television. Come on, Sam, where did you put them? You had a whole pile of stuff, and you had these things, and you put them somewhere. Nut bases. Right, thank you. And then throw them all over the floor. Dopey. Right, I've got a pile of them here, and some of them are lower design. So if I start with one of those, so anyway, so my setup involves changing the nut for usually an adjustable Tusq one, or at least a Tusq one, and then I throw this little hex key that I need really badly, throw it away. Then I level the frets, which are a prime limiting aspect of the of a guitar's playability, and then take care of the other normal parts of the setup, which will include checking and setting the neck relief. So I learned fairly early on that one of the key things that, or for most guitars, the limiting factor as to how low you can set the action tends to be the evenness or otherwise of the frets, and I learned that pretty early, and fairly equally early discovered that almost all guitars have uneven frets that need altering or flattening, leveling, which is what I started to do. So really the two key extra unusual different things that I do is the adjustable nut, and the fret leveling, and I use a particularly special fret leveling technique which has loads of unusual benefits to it, which is why I continue to do it. So just bear with me, I'm just going to zoom out for a minute, because I said I'm zooming out so I can see what's going on. Right, I'm going to do a bit of preparing of the nut slot, or the nut insert I should say. Yeah, so those are the two primary things that I do with my setup, and it's the fact that so many guitars, electric guitars, or all guitars actually, have uneven frets is the principal reason why I don't offer a sort of light LITE setup, which lots of guitar techs and luthiers seem to do. You know, the sort of 30 quid, I'll oil your fingerboard, put some new strings on, and away you go sort of job. Because I learned fairly quickly as well that mostly my customers want a tangible difference in the playing action, almost entirely lower. Very, very rarely did anyone actually ask for it to be higher. They tend to want it lower, and it's because on most guitars, to get it lower, I need to level the frets. Then I was doing that for every setup, and as a result of that, there's no point offering or promising to do a setup for 40 quid, because I can't give anyone any tangible difference for that kind of money, because the precision fret leveling and this work to get the nut right takes longer than, certainly even particularly when I was doing it, making these out of resin by hand, took a long time to make. But you'll see as we come to it in a minute, fret leveling part of it is also a long, careful, skilled process. So there's no point offering a cheap setup when you end up spending 2 to 3 hours minimum, or at least on most guitars. So I decided very early on that I wasn't going to compete in that field. So when I'd look at quote-unquote competitors offering setups, they're very often somebody local to me would be all over Facebook offering setups for 35 quid or something, often trying to get into the business, which is fine, people try to undercut, which is one approach to getting ahead in business. But you know, all they could do in that time, most of the time, well, either most of the time they weren't doing any fretwork leveling, so that, you know, for your 35 quid, you'd take the guitar there, they would take the strings off, tweak the neck, tweak the truss rod, clean it up, try to adjust your action, find they can't, stop at whatever point it starts buzzing at, usually. Oil your fingerboard, you know, check your intonation and good stuff like that, put some new strings on for you. You know, all of which are fine, but none of which would give you back a fundamentally different playing experience. Generally speaking, that, you know, you would still be the same action as before. So I sort of decided early on that my personal motto was that if you can't tell the difference, then I haven't set it up. Now, that's not trying to be cute or, you know, overly clever. It was just, you know, it was just sort of summed up that I wasn't playing a price game with similar competitors, you know, and there was no point having this sort of, you know, platinum, silver, gold list, you know, from 40 to £100 or whatever it is that people tend to like to do, because I was going to do the same thing every time, whether it was a Gibson or a vintage V99. So from early on I decided that my setup always involved, unless I had a very unusual stroke of luck and a guitar came through with perfect frets at the, you know, so that we could set the desired action the customer wanted without any chokes or chokes on the notes or buzzes anywhere, chokes on the bends I should say, or any buzzes, and that would be, that turns out in my experience to be incredibly rare. So it's by far the exception when I don't have to do any leveling. Anyway, so that became my sort of standard approach to setups, and you know, that's the market I was aiming at, people who wanted a tangible reduction in their playing action, and as much as anything wanted guitars that stayed in tune, hence the focus that I have done from the early days of doing this, a focus on the nut as the principal area for attention. So nearly there. So that's the sort of approach, and that's what I'm doing here. So I'm taking a quote-unquote bog standard, good quality Les Paul copy, and I'm doing everything to it that I do to make it play low and light and the best it can, and to stay in tune, because one of the things I realized early on is when I was a young punk, not exactly literally, but when I was young and foolish, you know, when we were youngsters, the brand names and the look of the guitars and stuff were, you know, which of our heroes played what, and you know, all that stuff was really, really top of the list of importance. And then when you get older, or when I got older, I discovered that I was so much more drawn towards the guitars in my collection that either by chance or by what I'd done to them stayed in tune. Especially you get that sensibility too when you play a lot with other people, I think, because you know, that's where it becomes critical. You know, if your instrument is never in tune, you just become a drag actually for the rest of the people you're playing with. It's not nice. Anyway, so I discovered after a while doing this sort of work that the priority listing of what mattered to me when I was a youngster had basically turned upside down, or spun round by 180 degrees, which I thought was quite amusing, really. So in the olden days, when I was a kid, the brand and the look of the guitar mattered more than almost anything else. And then the pickups, and then the playability, and the fact that we know this is true is evidenced by how many of us struggled on with such almost unplayable guitars throughout our early days. I mean, we stuck with some absolute monsters to play because they were either good looking or they reminded us of our heroes and so on. So anyway, I discovered that as we get older, that priority order, seems to switch completely to the point where it's almost completely, to all intents and purposes, reversed. And so as a result, it meant that my new priority in my world of guitars was staying in tune. Second came playability. And the logic behind that is pretty straightforward, because nowadays, if you think about it, if you're honest, you'll know that the guitars that you own that don't play in tune stay mostly on the peg, because they're just unlivable with. They don't call to you. And actually, the main experience that people tell me about when they bring me guitars is, it's fighting me. They say it feels like it's fighting me. So, and that's usually the mixture of the tuning, very much centered on the tuning, and the playing action, both of those which are my principal focus now. Right, so I'm just trying to get a good view while I get this done, sorted. Right, so we've now, a little bit more of this, 1 second. Right, we have 2 secs, somewhere like that. I've pretty much got this down to where size I want. It fits in. I'm just doing a quick bit of sort of fine sandpaper polishing, just to tidy it up. Yeah, so anyway, so I've really loved guitars is all about, as much as anything, those new priorities. Making guitars that play and stay in tune, followed by guitars that are beautifully easy to play, and then, of course, that will also sound good and look good. But while they're all, quite important things, how something looks, the reason it doesn't feature at the top of the priority is because if you're asking me to make you a custom guitar, if I make you one that looks brilliant but is unplayable or fights you and doesn't stay in tune and you just don't want to pick it up, then it actually won't matter how good looking the thing I've made you is. You just won't want to play it. So and it will be pointless. You'll have wasted your money. So that's why it all comes down to the I've just lost some screws, get them back, sorry. It all comes down to that, staying in tune and being easy to play. And that's what I really love guitars is about. Hence, I take this much care to get the first fret action right. Okay, so after all of that, I have now got this, as you can see, down to a size that fits, and fits just about perfectly. Now the great thing about using this adjustable nut, if I can just get this off here for a minute, the great thing about the adjustable nut is I've got some leeway. So when I put that nut in the slot just there, the first thing I don't have to do is I don't have to get it absolutely precise. I just have to get it low enough that I can lift up the insert on its little grub screw feet and get the action I want. So my target when I cut one down to size like this is to get it so that when I tighten up the strings again, put it under some load, I can then raise the first fret action now using the grub screws and get it to the right target height. So I'm just tensioning them for a minute to get going. Oh, let me just do something else. Before I tension them, let me just take them off a little thing to save time. Since we're here, let us do mark up. I'm going to mark up the fretboard right now. If I can just zoom out far enough. Come along. Ta-da. Yeah, so I'm almost certain I'm going to do some fret leveling when I've set the action that I want, which isn't yet, because if you remember, I've got to put a shim on this before we can get down to where I really want to get to. So what I'm going to do is, while I've got the strings loose, I might as well paint them with the marker pen for when I need to level the frets. Now, I level frets for two principal reasons. The first one is to get rid of any obvious high and low and whatever frets. The next one is to get rid of what I call fret slap, which is slightly different from individual high or low frets. The fret slap is the kind of result of a slight undulation in the fretboard overall, which causes some strings to hit the frets as they spin, usually the lower ones. So most guitars have that, and most guitars are prevented from going to a low action because of that. Now, just something I'm going to do right now. We know we have to raise this neck somewhat. So currently the strings are being pulled down against the pickups, confusing the issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by putting a capo across here, and I'm going to jump sort of ahead, if you like. Keep the strings loose. I don't want any tension on them, but I just want to hold. That's not even. What's wrong with this? Have I broken it? Has this thing lost its? Oh, it's too thin a neck. It's not actually gripping. Can you believe it? Let's try it there. That's rubbish too. I think this thing's worn out. Damn it. That's terrible. Have I got another one? No, I might as well just throw this in the bin. Well, I'm just going to hold them there. So what I'm going to do is, while I'm there, is I'm going to get a screwdriver. I'm going to find the right size bit, and I'm going to prepare me to take off the neck plate. And I want to, if I can find the right bit, take off the neck plate, and I'm going to put a shim under there right away, because I know I've got to do it, so I might as well get started and do it sooner rather than later. So the first thing I'm going to do, or another thing I'm going to do, is get a piece of shimming material, and I'm going to get my little brass, or my little cutters. Now, I have got here material called brass, and this stuff is actually a little, I normally would use tin actually, but this brass is a little thicker than, oh no, it's just 1/4 mil, that's fine. So I'm going to cut myself a little brass shim for the neck pocket. Now this is as a result of the neck pocket angle being slightly wrong here. So I'm going to mark it and cut it so that I can fit it in nicely most of the way across, but not too wide. So I'm going to cut this bit short here, and then I'll just tailor the edges so they're rounded and fit into the pocket at the back if there's any rounding. Ta-da! Put this back out of the way. Right, so in the zoom out mode, what I'm going to do now is take this off. Get quite loose. I'm going to see what I find. Could be any amount, very loose in fact. There could be all manner of problems under here for all I know. Very loose indeed. It could be that these have got no grip or the screw threads have worn out, so we might be into more serious remedial work in a minute. I'm jumping the gun, it may not be that bad. So let's examine it just for a sort of look. Okay, no shims there at the moment. If I just put this down here, looks okay. So I'm going to go ahead, and what I'll do first is I'm going to put this shim onto a piece of double-sided tape, to give it a grip of its own, so I need a piece of cutting ply. So this allows me to stick it where I want in the neck pocket, or on the heel, or in the neck pocket, without it moving around. So it stays there if and when anyone takes the neck off again. Bit fiddly. Sticky tape always is. Double-sided sticky tape always is. Okay, you go over there. So I haven't seen what the timing is, but this is taking care of the tuning stability and the basic playability. So this will sit comfortably there like that and be my shim baby. Now if there is a problem with the screw holes having worn through, which is sometimes the case, we're about to find that out now as I put this back in to the pocket and get ready to do it up. This holding the strings business really isn't doing anything, frankly, because it's lost its mojo. So now we're going to put these back in, and we'll pretty much know straight away if there's a power gripping problem, because they'll either spin or they'll be mushy. If that's the case, and we either need, they're not very long, these screws, relative to the thickness of the heel. If the heel had been cut with a bit more of an angle, we might have got more of a bite, so that could be part of the issue that we've got. So I'll go on a 3, torque first, without putting too much pressure on it, just to make sure it's okay. So what putting the shim there will do is to raise up the fingerboard to the strings. Oh, that's brilliant. The bridge has come off. Back on you go. Thank you. Right. Yeah, so we've raised up the angle. Now we'll have this, instead of trying to go down with a bridge that won't go down any further, we now have the fingerboard come up to meet the strings. That means now we'll probably want to go upwards with the bridge, which is fine. What we want is the ability to get to the target action with unhindered. So what we really care about now is at both ends, can we now go up to where we want? Well, we certainly can go up on both sides, whereas we couldn't before, but now we are. Let's leave that there for a minute, and we'll get broadly into tune first. Now I can see at this point, I'm now going to raise the, I don't know if you can see, but I'm now going to raise, oh boy, I wish I could make this thing work back to front. Thank you. I'm now going to raise up the the adjustable Tusq nut. So we've got the A tightened up. Now I'm going to raise this, give myself a little bit of height there, and I'll do the same on the treble side. Now we've got space for the notes to play. Now we can go back for the tuning and then check the action again. So I'll get my string height chart thing, and I'm now going to check, long view, I'm going to check the action at this end again. and we'll set it exactly where we want it. So currently that's running at just over 1.5, so we'll go in a little bit further, just on 1.5, and that's just on 1.5, so we'll go a little bit further. So the target is 1.2 and 1.5. Now we'll go for tuning again. Give everything a quick stretch while we're at it. You can hear that no pinging on the strings or anything. Beautiful. Going into tune perfectly well. Blast, man. It's always the way when you're stretching strings. Oh well, I'm sure I've got a 9 somewhere. Huh. Maybe, possibly, maybe not. Sacrificial strings. Oh, if only I had a kind benefactor. I don't know, someone with an alliterative name. Someone who sent me sacrificial strings. Several sets of sacrificial strings, several seasons of the year. Perhaps someone by the name of Simon who sent me sacrificial strings. A saviour of the sacrificial strings, you might even call them. Oh, and this big box of strings provides me actually with an unusually cheap one, but it'll do. A sacrificial string. And I've got whole sets thanks to Simon's sacrificial strings. Kept me over the last couple of years in the style, the string style in which I have become accustomed, to which I have become accustomed. And that's why you need them, because when you're tightening things, things like that happen. And you end up needing a spare string just for the fret leveling part of the game. Slightly annoying, but such is the life. So let me just wind this one on. Okay, on you go. Come on, come on. Do up, do up. Now the cheaper ones tend to break off. The ball comes off very easily, so not going to take any risks. I'm not going to bend it unnecessarily too much. Okay, there is our guitar at the action. I'm going to throw this cap away because clamping it there is useless. Well, I'll put it here and I'll test it again later, but if it's no good, it's going in the bin. Right, so what we have now is okay, so we've got a little bit of choke out there, which I expected. So we've got a very, I'll throw that away too because that's worn out. Missed. I need to buy, I've got millions of these screwdriver heads, but I keep losing the sort of day-to-day ones. It's always the way, isn't it? You get left up with a set of sort of either over large heads and then you think, where's the ones I need for everyday operation? And you can't find them. What was I going to say? Yeah, well, I'm going to tighten up the neck bolts. And I'm going to go put my thingy to 5. Set my thing to 5. And I'm going to tighten them up. And there we go. Make sure this is nicely in place and stays in place. Lovely. Beautiful. Right. So I've counted the it still doesn't, I mean, it still doesn't have the same, what do you call it, the same angle as the body, but that's how it was made. It's a shame because they usually kind of look a lot better when they've got the same angle, but maybe that's saved for a proper Les Paul day. Now I'm trying to get out a little tray of strap buttons, of which I've got billions of spare ones, courtesy of Adam's never-ending parts supplies, and I say that with massive gratitude. There's a nice looking set of things. Well, I mean, you know, I could put these fellas on, but they're sort of meant for, what do you call it, you know, they're basically meant for the word I'm looking for is shallow strap locks. No, I thought I found something I was looking for the other day, but I didn't. Okay, well, oh, there's one. So look, you could have a shallow set. Since there aren't a full set on there anyway, why don't we go for that? Why don't we get that off, chuck them out. We've got chrome stuff, haven't we? So let's get rid of those. Let's chuck all of that in there. I've got like millions, man, of these things. Let's go for some new ones of these. Why not? And let's have some black felts as well. Button felts, 2 black ones please. I'm nearly at the stage where I've got to buy some more. Right, let's try these nice big screws right now without having to drill any new holes. It'd be nice if we can just fit them, but we'll get it done while we can. Examines the end. That should be alright. Doesn't look too far out. Holds tight. Yeah. Lovely. Just doing things as I see them as we go along, you see. Make sure that's there. I will take, when I take the strings off after the leveling, I'll take the strings and the hardware off, most of the stuff off, and we'll give it all a clean as well. I think I'll take the tunes off to give the headstock a refresh, since we're here and since we can. Oh yeah, nice and solid, baby. Look at that. 2 new strap buttons. Okay, that was enjoyable. So we've got our string in, we got our new strap buttons on, we've got our nut not glued in but positioned. Everything's going well. We've got a little bit of choke out on the high strings. Let's do a very gentle bit of precision leveling. So if I were to look at this, I could say to you, oh look, the colour's gone all bizarre. Oh, thank you. We're at an hour, okay, and I've just got the nut on. And I have, what else have I done? Got the nut on and something or other. Sorry, I've got the nut on. Can I make this work? Thank you. Got the nut on, done the strap buttons, lowered the action, nuts ready to be glued in when we've finished the leveling, ready to level. Get me tools out for that. So once the leveling's done, the main precision stuff will be done, and the rest really will be cleaning up and taking care of small details like that. So I'm going to now use my trademark levelling apparatus, and here we are. This is going to give everything a very light level, but it's going to tell us as much as it's going to do. So it's going to do things, but in the leveling, it starts off by kind of giving us an idea about what the frets are like. So I start off by calibrating this to the relief curve. Now remember I said that the treble side had quite a lot more relief in it than the bass side, and you can see that because it's taken me a little while to tighten this up and dial in the amount of curvature to represent what's on the guitar neck. In fact, That's quite a lot. Still, we'll do it with this much, and if we want to adjust it afterwards. The problem is, you see, is if you've got very little, it's a fraction too much now. If you've got very little on the bass side, and you need to keep a bit of relief on the bass side, and the treble side, by definition, is naturally more flared or more relieved, you have to go with one or the other. You have to kind of compromise. So in this case, I'm leaving more relief in the treble side because I need some in the bass side, if you get what I mean. If I take any out, if I adjust the truss rod to take out a little out of the treble side, this will go flat and we'll get fret buzzing when we don't want it. So, here we go. Here we go, here we go, here we go. And I am now doing a first initial up and down the track, as I would call it. And what this is going to tell me is some very interesting things. Okay, it will obviously start to address any high frets that are sticking up. But if I bring you round, it's always difficult in this sort of light to show you what we can see and get it to stay in focus. So, I don't know how much you can see, but starting at this end, just about touching, cutting, 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 not at all, not at all, not at all, cutting, 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 not at all, not at all, not at all, cutting, 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 none. So this tells me straight away, because I've got some cutting in at every major spot in all three areas of the fretboard, i.e. left, middle and right, it tells me my calibration of the rod, that is right. But it then tells me we've got a low patch here. Where is it, mate? A low patch here, at least on this side. We've got a low patch here. And what happens is, high frets are easy to understand because a high fret will get in the way and cause a fretted note to buzz. But low frets are the secret killer that we have to overcome more often than not. So these low frets here could be low enough so that they make the next fret effectively high in relative to the one before it. If that's the case, then this will choke out because of its lowness, not because of this essential highness, if you get what I mean. So we've got, basically it's telling us we've got up, down, up, down, up, and just starting to go down at the end there. And that's a curvy thing, and what my method of fret leveling allows me to do is to level that, gently level it out. So I'm effectively imposing onto this fretboard, this undulating fretboard, I'm imposing gently a more perfect curve in this truss rod. I'm imposing that onto this imperfect curve. And I don't need to do it that much to clear up any issues. Now I can see that these are still not cutting at all, so they're starting to look quite low. And hopefully for the action I've set, they won't be too much of a problem. But if I now try out okay, not too bad. So sometimes they'll still be low, but they're low just below the action that we've set. And that's great because we don't need to do much more or any more than that. I'm just going to go slightly to the edge of this just to catch up. But I'm going to stop there for the E track and move on. Now a bit earlier when I did a bend and noticed that the high E choked out bending across to the G, that is a problem that you get with the G track. So we'll be looking to clear that bend up when we level the G track. But first of all, we're in the B. Now again, I know that the relief curve is changing as we come this way, so I expect to alter it next time when I recalibrate for the G track. But as I go now, I'm sort of expecting to see the same low spots appear again. And so the first thing I'll do is kind of stop and just double check. Yep, low here. Now the lowness is now only confined to these two. This one's beginning to cut, so this has got low spot here, here and here, but it's only low here and here on this run. These are starting to cut a little bit, so it's right on the edge that we've got this strange, it's bumpier than anywhere else, so that's good to know. But this method is the only leveling method I know that takes care of this problem. It's also the only leveling method that you can stop, like I'm doing now, and play the notes at the chosen playing action. And test them out, and that's brilliant, because as soon as I've got it playing the way I want, I stop. I don't go any further, I don't level any further than that. Now I'm into the all-important G track, and I'm going to recalibrate, because I know that the relief curve now will have changed, or I expect it to have changed. In fact, it actually feels very much the same on here, so it hasn't changed that much. Now again, we move the string out of the way, and I'm going to now concentrate, and my aim now will be that this leveling gets rid of that choked out high E bend that we were getting before. So that's my principal target, and of course it's up this high end anyway, so I'm just going to sort of pay it that bit more, a little bit more attention at this top end, just to make sure we get this evened out again. So I'm seeing a couple of low ones there. Actually everything else is cutting now, so these are no longer low, so that's good. But let's hear if we've eked out or fixed the choke out. So we want the high E bends. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, yeah, I'm in a hole. So it's there, yeah. So I'm on the far side of the G, and it's still just very slightly a dip. I can see that. You won't be able to see it from here, but I can tell it's just ever so slightly a dip. So I'm going to concentrate up on this G track a little bit more up here, and make sure we get this bit evened out right across to the to the D area. So I can see a couple of frets that are obstructing, but that actually now looks like it should be freed up. A bit of dust there, because we've had to hit down, by default it's hit down on a couple of these afterwards. We should now get this to bend. Okay, that's now choking out on there. We just double check the overall action so I'm not hiding to nothing, because I did tighten that thing up, so yeah, we're fractionally low actually. Only a tiny bit, about 1/4 of a millimetre too low, but let's not make it impossible. Right. See? There's a 1/4 of a mil difference there. Okay, that's good. Let's go now recalibrate for D. Yeah, sometimes that I can tell when I've gone fraction too low, because that's always my tendency to do, by the way. And it tells me, because I can't, that bit of leveling should have eked out or cured that little tiny bit of choke in the bend, and it didn't. So I then questioned the action height that I'd set, which is the right thing to do, because I'd actually on a Les Paul, an old style Les Paul like this, you don't want to be aiming for 1 millimetre last fret. It's just too much to expect of an old-ish neck like this. So here we are in the A track again. Principal concern is we're not really ever going to bend a high E over in this direction, but we might bend the other way, so we want to bend down the A. We're in the D track, sorry if I didn't say that. We want to be able to play all the individual notes and bend down the A into the D track and make sure it plays. So we test the individual notes. Pretty good. Tiny, minute bit of fizzle right at the top end there, That's so minute, but since we're almost there, I'm just going to give that a tiny bit more attention with the file, because why not, since we're so darn close anyway. Right, that's good. Now we're going to recalibrate for the A, and so when we've finished this, I'll be ready to sort of take everything off and clean up. Now the thing is, it looks quick, or I'm doing this fairly quickly I should say, but the key thing in all of this is the experience to be able to recognize what this tool is telling me about the shape of the neck, and that's the really important thing. It tells me what the neck is doing, and it tells me what I need to do, and how, you know, whether it's possible to free up these chokes or these buzzes or whatever. And it's the experience that you can't really get through any other way other than doing it lots. So it's definitely an acquired or an experiential skill to be able to learn what it's telling you about the underlying neck. Let's have a quick listen. So here on the A, we're mostly listening out for the individual notes to make sure they play all right. So I've managed to lose plectrum. There it is. Thank you. A tiny bit of ziz from 15 upwards. I'll give that a little bit of a push. But beyond that, everything else is very good. Again, when to stop is often a matter of intuition, instinct, experience really. I could try and describe it, but it would be a bit like me trying to describe how it is that you know you're singing correct pitch when you're singing along to a song. You know, it's one of those things that we all sort of know how to do, mostly, but you could never really describe it in words. Or you'd struggle to describe it in words, I should say. So we've got a low spot here, which is why, as we come over to this side now, the relief is showing a bump that's on, or a dip on this side. And that's the thing I forgot to mention, is that dips don't even stay universal. Sometimes you'll have dips, rises and falls over here that aren't the same over on this side. And in this case, we've got a low spot here, which is causing that, what I call fret slap. Hear that? You're in the hole there, and that means it's going to make the next ones effectively high. Now we are at dead on 1.5 mils, so just in the spirit of challenging the frets, I'm going to revert to this one more time. I don't want to kill too much metal, but I'm going to now just concentrate or focus my attention on the far end here to try and bottom out this dip. Now, you could probably guess just by the way I'm using the language, bottoming out a dip. If that means taking down the frets on either side, then you're certainly right to imagine that that's a potentially costly process as far as metal is concerned, and that's what we have to balance up. How much metal we want to spend in chasing that low action. Now, I think we're about as far as I'm really comfortable going with this low E, and so we've got from about the 12th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th a low. Simple as that. There's a low spot, and I can't, maybe I'll do one more go at them, but I can't really do much more to this other than grind down the whole of this end of the fingerboard, which is kind of what a lot of people do when they do the that business of putting a fall away onto a guitar, but it's not often, it's not usually for this reason. This is kind of, I'm finding this more necessary because of a sort of regional, a local dip, which is what ultimately constrains the action you can set, along with a bit of fretwork like this. But the bottom line is, if ultimately, if that dip is too great, which it's looking like it is, then we'll have to draw a halt to leveling, and then maybe respond with a tiny tweak upwards. But that shows you the scale of the dips. Well, I'm not going to lower it any further. I'm not going to drop the action. And the reason why is that you almost would never play the E string there. Now that's not, it's acceptance or admission that it's not perfect, but it's the best we can do with the frets that we've been given. And that's how it has to work all the time. It's always a balance. Okay, so I think it's time for me to get cleaned up, and also to take off hardware and give this a clean, because after that, take off the hardware. What I'll do is, actually, let's just stay with me for 1 minute. We'll do the next thing. We'll do the crowning, fret crowning, then I'll go off camera and do the polishing, polishing and sanding out business, and then we'll come back when it's all clean, and I'll clean up, get a cup of coffee and all of that in the break. So right now, as you can see, I've done the leveling and I've used my experience and judgment to call a halt to any further leveling, judging that we've got the very best playability for the action, without taking any more metal off the frets, which I don't want to do, because it's always a trade-off between metal and flatness. The other thing about this as well is that there are situations in which you need to learn through experience when continued leveling doesn't achieve anything. There are very real points at which you hit the law of diminishing returns until the point of pointlessness, actually, and you've got to know what those are so that you don't push onwards, just sort of grinding away fret metal, thinking you're going to get somewhere when you're not. So that's an important experiential thing too, which I think I'm going to take the plastic off this cover because it's bubbled and it's dirty with this dust as well. So I'm going to be the naughty person that does it, because I'm cleaning everything up and I want it to look at its best, and it doesn't look at its best with bubbles of stuff. Oh no, hang on, I don't want to undo that one. Sorry, I know, terrible view now. I'm just undoing this. I'm going to take the scratch plate off and clean under there as well, because it was nice to get every bit of dust out that we can while we can. Thank you. While I'm at it, let's see if we can find a nice looking tip for that. Oh, look at that. Is that fitter? No. Don't think it is. Darn. Too loose. Oh, would you believe it? I don't have I've got a black one. I thought I had a cream one. Alright, black it is, I'm afraid. Better than none though. No charge. Gratis. Compliments of Relove Workshop. Right, take the bridge off as well. Okay, so the bit I will do before tea is the crowning business. So I'm going to see what you can see using my mirrored technique. Right, well, let's show you just from there. Okay, so I'm going to mark off the what's its once again. Now remember, I've still got this business of fret ends being a bit sharp, so I'm going to do a little bit of extra fret work on those this time round, because it is a bit sharp on this guitar. Let me see if I can soften them a bit. I'll do my best to soften the fret ends anyway with the what's the word I'm looking for? Sanding and polishing process. But either which way, I will attempt to round them off a bit more anyway. So here I am using the fret crowning file to round off the frets, the flat edge that I may have created during the leveling process, and just restore it to as close to an arch shape as possible, which is what the fret likes to play properly. So you get a nice bit of clean as well of this fingerboard before we restring later on. So you can have the switch tip for free. You can have the Schaller strap button bits for free, because they were donated to me in their thousands, it appears, by Adam. So I got a fair few of those. In fact, you can have the locking bits I'll attach to them, because they really don't need to stay with me. So you can have them for free, since I got them for free. Right. So my take on this is that if Adrian doesn't immediately feel a difference, then I don't think I've succeeded, because all of this is absolutely aimed at making a tangible difference to how this feels to play, and also how well in tune it stays. Now, quite often those two things translate also into it sounding a better guitar, and the truth is I haven't really done anything that will affect the sound, because that's not part of the brief, but it's amazing how the minute something stays in tune and you stop, you lose that feeling of fighting it. The most amazing thing is how much better you feel about it, and you suddenly fall in love with the guitar again. And then when you do, it sounds better to you, because you're in a far better mood and you're enjoying it. And I think that's really profound, really, to know that changing the way it plays and stays in tune can have such a big effect on how you hear it, even though actually I would definitely argue I haven't changed a single thing about the way it sounds. I'm just going to turn this one around so I can get to this last fret here without getting in the way of this button, because this is quite relatively flattened, so I have to work these ends a little bit harder. These are the ones that were relatively high compared to the low ones here. Okay. So that's that bit. Now, the bit that I'm thinking of here is these fret ends. I think still need this little bit of work here. Now, this is normally something you'd probably only have to do with a new guitar, but I'm just doing this because I feel there's a bit of extra unnecessary sharpness in here that I want to have a go at undoing. So I'm trying to just round off a little bit. The danger is I want to come up from this side, from underneath with the file, but the problem with that is you usually end up hitting or taking away more of the binding finish, or the poly on the binding, which in fact when you're end beveling a set of frets on a guitar with a neck with binding is something you can't avoid. Actually, you can't end bevel without hitting the finish at some point. And for me, it's always a sort of a judgment call, a playoff about where do you stop, where do you start. How much is acceptable, and what do you do if you don't think it's acceptable. It's a difficult one to have a set answer for. So I don't really know, and sometimes when it's an old guitar and I've managed to make it, softened off the end by doing this, and or by the use of the end bevel when I've refretted end beveling file. Sometimes I have to go and build up some clear poly back on the edge because it's taken off more. That's often the case it's usually the case when the guitar's old and I've refretted it. But I'm just trying to do as much as possible to round off these frets so that they're softer. Now, any fret marks I'm making here, I can take care of when I do the overall sanding process in a minute. So I'll just turn this round the other way so you can see. Do the same thing. And also, it's very difficult because at the end, the fret beveling block is always, unless you do deliberately aim to hit the finish on the neck, on the binding, you will not be flush. You will not cut the fret flush with the binding. It will stand proud because you've stopped short in order not to damage the binding. So it's one or the other. If you want to save the binding, you end up with a little sharp razor blade of the fret sticking out too far, or if you go and take away that little razor blade sticking out, you will almost certainly take away some of the poly on the binding. You literally cannot do otherwise. The only way around it is not to have binding and to just have frets that come through the wood, through the slot, straight to the edge, and you bevel them flush to the wood, and the metal is flush to the wood. That's usually quite a nice finish, except when the wood shrinks fractionally and you end up with the end of the fret appearing to creep out, when in fact what happens is the wood recedes microscopically away from the end, and you get this blade reappear, and your fingers are so sensitive that they pick it up straight away, as you can imagine. Oop, right. I'm going to take off you can't see it, but I'm going to lift off the nut and put it there, ready for a bit later on when it's time to put it back on. Let me just, I don't know what you can see here at the moment, but let me just have a look, because some of the sharp bits I noticed were down here, but it's tricky because the way they've finished this is that the finish is sort of ridden up a bit to the edge of the metal, but as soon as you start trimming the metal, you'll be scraping the finish. So it's that same old boundary problem. There's no way around it really, you can't escape it. You can just try, if you use a file like this, you can just do your damnedest to stay kind of away, avoid scraping anywhere other than the very end of the fret. But even that is quite difficult, and actually you can hear the cutting. There's quite a bit of overhang here. That's what's making these feel as sharp as they do, so I'm trying my best to tame them a little bit. You can hear the metal, but it's very, very difficult to avoid running off to one side. yeah, quite a lot of overhang. The best way really is to re-end bevel until it's flush, but it would cost in terms of in finish. So there's stuff up here, that's not too bad, but I'm just going to try and take care of these. You can hear the metal grinding. And after this I will have a cup of coffee, and do some fret polishing. So what I'll do is I will mask off the fretboard and polish out all of these frets by hand, sand them and polish them, and then we'll clean everything up after that, including a general all-over clean of the guitar, including taking the tuners off and cleaning under there. Give it a sort of new bit of a refresh, if you like, because it's a great Les Paul copy, these V99s. I like them. You can hear again the sort of fret overhang cutting there. Well, try and just do my best to soften it up a little bit more than it was anyway. So that's as good as I can do with the file. Still a little sharp, but then we'll get the sandpaper into there when we do the sanding out. Okay, so yeah, polishing out next, taping off, polishing out. So I'll go off, see you in a minute. After a load of polishing and stuff, you can see how nice everything looks. Glint, glitter, lovely and clean. Everything back together, tuners back on, everything, frets polished out. Yum, yum, yum. As shiny as I can make them. So, next bit, oh yes, bit here. We're coming to the stringing up part. Let me just get you down this end, sorry. Right, so this is an important bit just to know when you're doing stringing a guitar with a, what do you call it, adjustable nut. So let's just get these all laid out in order. So when you've got an adjustable nut, I recommend you do the D and the G first, and that's only because this part is loose, technically speaking, and could go, if it's very loose, it isn't on this guitar, but sometimes it can go flying off if it isn't held down, so it's always just worth keeping in mind. So I'm going to go with the D first, and I'm going to line up all my tuner holes into the right place to make stringing easier. I've also oiled the fingerboard as well, cleaned and oiled the fingerboard, I should add, so it's all nice and fresh. Now I'm putting on these Didarios that came supplied. I'm not 100% convinced in how new or fresh they are, but anyway, so we'll come to that if it has a problem intonating. So what I do is I go all the way through and then hold on the first fret, pull one fret back, and then start winding on, and then I hold the held string up so the loose string goes underneath it. Keeping it taut, I then help guide the held string underneath the loose string, and I help that along by pulling up the loose string, so it goes underneath the string stub, I suppose you could call it, and then that keeps that locked in place. So somewhere are my cutters. Here they are. So that comes off there, right to the stub. Okay, so that's the D, and then we'll do the G, and then we'll do the rest. So that's now anchored or pinned down the nut. So even if it was loose-ish, which this one isn't, it just happens not to be, but if it were very loose, it would still stay in place. I'm not convinced about these Didarios, I have to say. They came in a sealed pack, so they should be the biz, but they feel a bit old to me. So oh God, I'm not convinced. Same thing, pull back 1 fret's worth, hold it down, keep this one tense, so hold that under tension, over the top of the loose bit first time round, keep sending it round, pull up the loose bit, and then direct the held string underneath the loose bit the second time round and let it come up. And then that will go, actually it's about 1.5 turns in this case. And then cut the stuff off. Let me just see something a minute. I want to know, that's what it's going to tell me, is it? There's no idea of a date. These are item code. There's no date, batch date or anything on them. They don't have the modern D'Addario thing that says chest, go here and check to make sure they're genuine. They just feel a bit odd to me, but we'll see how they play. And if they're horrible, I will change them out. I think one of the things that will tell me is if I get any trouble intonating them, they're coming straight off. Because remember I said at the beginning I had trouble intonating the first lot that were on there, and the pattern of intonation is all wrong. So if these show up the same way, then they're coming off because I think they're fakes or are so old they've gone off or something. But anyway, we won't decide on that just yet. See how it goes. So cutting right back to the inside, so everything is done up. I mean, everything is safely out of the way. No stubs sticking out to catch people's fingers. Now, this looks okay. The winding on the end of this looks right, but they don't feel perfect to me. I could just be, like I say, it'll go on the grounds of the intonation. I'll know if they're good strings, if the intonate okay. So now in taking the all the hardware off and stuff, I've changed the action now, so I will need to reset the playing action. But of course the good thing is having done the leveling to the playing action that we chose, I can now return to that playing action at any time, and the thing will go perfectly in, it'll play beautifully. Pong. And the top two. It's the plain ones that have a slightly greasy feel to them in my mind, but that's maybe just me. Like I say, we shall find out. I mean, that's one of the things I've learned to trust, is this thing about the position of the saddles when it's correctly intonated. These guitars, or electric guitar strings, made to a consistent manufacturing process, seem to be very dependable in the way they intonate, and it's part of the sort of sign that they're following the consistent manufacturing process, that each time they will intonate in the familiar 2 groups of 3 staggered pattern. If they don't, then it's often an indicator that something weird is going on. And so far, in my experience, I sometimes find a single string out of a pack is out or wrong, in which case it just will not intonate in the correct sequence. And rather than leave it out of sequence, I know it's slightly dud string, so I replace it, and immediately the replacement always goes into the correct sequence. So it just goes to show that that is what you can expect each time. With that's what I found with individual strings or single strings, but I've also found when I deliberately bought fake strings to test them, or counterfeit strings, the first thing I found straight away is I measured them, and their physical measurements are all wrong compared to the specification. And on top of that, the intonation as a result is completely skew width, just doesn't want to know. So you know, I guess it means that the counterfeit makers can't be bothered, or you know, don't have machinery making accurate stuff to an accurate spec. So anyway, we shall see. So having put the strings on, first thing I do is average tuning. Sorry, before I do that, I go and check the action down at this end, make sure it's back where I wanted it, so we get good playability. So that's a bit low. Right. With you in a minute. So the secret of tuning stability, I think I said, where's my long way, halfway. Secret of tuning stability is two things. It's worth just thinking, if you want to get your tuning right, get two things right, and I ascribe to them each 50% of the role of keeping it in tune. First one is getting the nut right, the right material, the right first fret action height, which we've got there. The second one is stretching all of the unwanted or unreleased slack out of your strings. So you put on your new strings and you've got to stretch them out. This pays off if you take the time to do it. This will pay off in terms of you being able to pick this guitar up off the shelf. Not only will it be almost either definitely or very nearly in tune every time you pick it up, but it will also play and stay in tune, so you won't have to worry about tuning it every 5 seconds, and every time you bend notes and stuff, it'll still be in tune, which, you know, we've all played with. These are fake, that's why I don't like them. Right, they're going, sorry. Fake strings, there's no point struggling with junk. Fake or old, they're coming off. That's it, it's final. I don't like it. Goodbye. Yeah, broke at the windings, not on the ball actually. So they're going. So there you go. I should have just saved the time in the first place. I wasn't happy with them, and there's me foolishly trying to persevere with them, and I'm not going to. It's silly. It's a false economy. So goodbye. I knew they weren't right. So, out you come. Don't like. Don't know what was wrong with them, but they were either old or flawed or fake or something. And if they were from the same batch as the ones you already had on there, Adrian, I think that wouldn't surprise me, because the ones you had on there weren't intonating properly. So these are going in the bin, and some ones that I can trust are going on. It's a false economy. Here we go. Completely different feel, I've got to say. These have got, and these are in pairs as well, which the other ones weren't. So there's all kinds of things. Totally non-greasy by comparison. All right, so adjacent pairs, which means put those over there, put those over there. Let's do the middle two first, I should still have said. Right, well anyway, you've seen the first winding on thing. The same thing applies, only slightly at a distance now, and zoomed out, but what the hell. So let's go with the D. Is that the D? Yes. Different metal. They've got this bronze looking metal in here as well. I don't know, man. Those didn't look right or feel right to me. Fakies. I bet they were from a batch, same as the other ones. I'll bet. Anyway, wouldn't surprise me. But so same old thing. G. Yeah, this has got no, there are no dimples and bends and buckles on these. The other ones had. Was not feeling good. These feel fine, absolutely fine. The beers. Anyway, so yeah, the tuning, if we get back to it in a minute, tuning stability is down to those two things. Half of it is your nut and your nut slots and the correct first fret action going along with that as part of the deal, which is why I take so much time to get that right. The next, the other 50%, then you can consider it to be, the slack, the unreleased slack in your strings, and that's why when we're not dealing with crappy cheap strings, we need to stretch out all the unreleased slack. It's funny, these have got a completely different colour core in these strings than the ones I just had there, so I think these are genuine. I know that for sure, because I buy them from a good source, but because I've been bitten with counterfeits, so I just simply will not buy fake strings. I will not buy strings off eBay anymore, for example. I only buy them from Strings Direct, or somewhere that's got a credible reputation that they are willing to protect at all costs. And if I find anything the matter with their strings, then I'm straight back at them. But yeah, it's far too much of a risk, especially when I think it was after getting a few sets of fake elixirs one after another, including from a seller who I think he was trying to be a genuine seller, and as soon as I said, look, I'm not happy with these particular ones, he sent me more strings, a new set, which were of course exactly the same batch, because that's all he was selling. So I think he'd landed himself with an absolute ton of these fake elixirs, and the point was that there's no point sending me more of the same, because they're all fake. And when you think of the monies involved, then it's no surprise that our dear Chinese friends will be faking them like crazy, because there's so much money tied up in them. It's so hard for the average person to spot the difference. So it's like printing money. If you've got a factory that makes strings and you've got somewhere to print some convincing looking boxes, then away you go. It is a license to print banknotes. If you think a set of strings might cost you, I don't know, 15p to make or something in your mass factory, and some Chinese strings are even decent quality, but so if you cover them up put some fake branding on them, you're making a 10,000 or whatever % profit. It's if you can shift them, it's highly profitable. Anyway, so there you go, a few minutes wasted because I should have listened to my inner quality assurance critic. My mistake, my fault. There we go. Right, back to where we were. So the fun part is the stretching, and of course, you have to be careful. There's always a risk of breaking a string, simple as that. But you find with the quality strings, it doesn't happen anywhere near as often as it does, as you just saw, with bad or cheap strings. Okay, so we go to a basic tune-up. And just get everything relatively in tune. And then you get the strings and you stretch them again, thumb and forefinger like this, to squeeze out all the inherent slack that's in there. And if you do it, like I said, you will be repaid with tuning stability beyond your wildest imaginings. That's the story I'm sticking to. Now, like I said, you can still break them. It doesn't depend on them being fake. Thin strings are thin strings, but these are tens, right? So they shouldn't break that easily during tuning, stretching. In fact, they don't break very often. So what you find is the plain strings will stabilize first, and then you'll catch up with the wound ones later, and then you'll settle down and you'll be able to play all night long, all day and all of the night, and it will stay in tune. But obviously I am being careful in my stretching. Right, okay. So what I'll do next is I now expect the intonation to be quite a way out. That's my expectation, and that will confirm to me that the previous strings were duff as well, which I wouldn't be surprised if they're from a batch. So you know, if these the ones that Adrian had in the box were of a set, could well be the case, but we shall see. Right, let's just check the action one more time. 1.5, 1.2, maybe. Okay, now let's do the fun part, the intonation part, and I think I'll have to make with my screwdriver here, because I suspect this is going to be, I think this is going to be quite a way off, out of whack. Another Steve Martin reference there. Yeah, it's going to be out of whack, because I think it was intonated before on dodgy strings. So let us see. Now, of course, the problem with this intonation malarkey is either I put the thing on thing. Let me just see what the time is first. Like 8:30. Huh? How did it get to that time already? If I put it on a strap, then I don't have to prop it up so much. That nice new strap buttons, hopefully, that I can trust. I like to trust them. Right. So first of all, let's try this out. But this should be way off now. Okay, that's all right. I'm expecting the lower ones to be miles off. Wrong tuner. Right, here we go. Start to reset them. Where's the screwdriver gone? So this one, what's it saying, is too long? Yep, too long. Oh, right, let's check the other ones because I can't stand these adjusters. Short, yeah. Right, first two are good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take everything off that using this screwdriver, and I'm going to put everything back where it should be in a normal pattern, which is currently wrong. Now that's more like it. Quite a lot out, but this should find us, once I've done this, we should be sort of close to where it should be. And the only question is do we get all the way without running out of intonation room? I mean, this is from one end to the other of the what do you call it, bridge. So if that's even close to being close, it just goes to show that the other strings were probably fake, because old strings are can be a little bit out, but they're never so radically out as what appears these were. Right, that one's a bit on the flat side. Okay. Come along, come along. Weird. What's the angle on this thing? Oh, it is angled, isn't it? That's strange. How peculiar can you get? Check the straps, good. headstock's ringing. Good. Tusq. It's done. Quick. Make sure everything runs. Yes, we're plugged in. Whoa, fuck. Excuse me. Holy shit. Off. Blimey. She's good. I'm happy. All going good. Rightio, into the bag. Not travelling tomorrow. It'll go the morning after. Gives me time to let it settle for a day, double check it tomorrow evening, and then I'd be packed, ready to go. Fab. All good. Everything taken care of, all the little bits done and dusted. Thank you for watching. Look, it's picking up dust even as I finish. You can't keep a black Les Paul copy clean, but it's she's a beaut. So the wrong case, so I'm going to repack it in the case. Just a little hint. I know it's sometimes the Strat style case, even though it's all we've got, is the wrong case for the job, and it's so it is so. Whoops. So in this case, I may have to cut away to hide personal information there. Yeah, so it'll close for now, but I think for the journey back, I want to make sure it's under pressure already, which it doesn't like to be really. The lid's sort of pulling down on it a bit. Not good. I don't feel good about it. Trust your instincts, lad. Well, we'll get it sorted out for travelling. Okie dokie. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you again very soon on something else.